Hi, everyone, and welcome to Val Talks Pets, the forum for pet parents and enthusiasts alike. Having been in the pet industry for over 10 years now, I'm going to share with you issues and questions that arise as I work with pet parents on a day-to-day basis. I am not a veterinarian, but I do have certifications in canine, feline, small animal, fish and herptile, and avian health and nutrition from the University of California, Davis Extension. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this episode of Val Talks Pets. Today, I have with me one of my favorite people and member of the National Service Dog family. I met Kat Anderson a few years ago when I partnered with National Service Dogs for fundraising and found that a working service dog was in my area from NSD. Kat's son, Atlas, is on the autism spectrum, and they had a service dog named Harris, who is a yellow lab. Kat's family story with NSD and Harris is quite something, and I will let her fill everyone in on that. But more importantly, Harris had to retire. So what happens then? Well, Kat is here to share with us that journey. Well, welcome, Kat. I'm so excited to have you on the show because, we've worked together for years now with National Service Dogs. Yeah, and I love the ability that you have to really speak to people about the role of service dogs. And of course, as you know, I love your retired service dog, Harris.
He's pretty lovable.
He is lovable. And now you have a new service dog, Arnie, who is as adorable, but quite different in personality from Harris.
Yes,
absolutely.
Much different.
Yeah. So I thought if you could maybe go over your story a bit, and then we can focus a little bit on what does happen when a service dog has to, retire after many years, and what you do and the whole bit, because I think that's a big question. So
they're huge questions.
Yeah,
we've actually been asked that quite a bit, but yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
So my name is Kat. I have two kids, and my oldest, my son, his name is Atlas. He is just about to turn 13.
Oh my God.
And our journey with a service dog started when he was pretty young. We were extremely fortunate. We kind of had some red flags on Atlas's development and some serious concerns about his communication and his ability to connect to others and tolerate spaces. And it was a bit of a laundry list at the time. When he was about maybe a year and a half.
Oh, really?
And yeah, he was pretty young when we kind of noticed some of these. It was almost like he was starting to experience regressions where he had certain skills in place and then he kind of lost them. So he kind of lost the ability to make eye contact. He lost the ability to gesture at things. He had accumulated, a small vocabulary, and he was able to label parts of his face and count, the stairs in our house. And then all of a sudden he kind of lost these skills, and it was really difficult to connect to him. So we investigated thoroughly, and we were fortunate to kind of get an answer about a week after his second birthday. He got a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, which to me was a bit of a relief because I had answers, and we kind of, addressing it going forward, we kind of knew what we needed to learn about, and we were at least kind of on a path and having a bit of direction. So very, very early days, I was invited by a local agency to join in a parent autism support group. And I hesitantly went. My child, out of all of the families or mothers that were in the group, was much younger than the average kid, who I think was probably hovering around 10, 11, 12, and kind of some of this into teenage years.
Oh,
so
really?
I was kind of really green I was still Googling autism, and I didn't really understand what it meant and what it would mean for his future. But I knew some of the major challenges that I had, and I took the opportunity to share in hopes that some of these more seasoned autism parents could kind of share some strategies and share some tips, and just let me lean on them a little bit to try to learn and to try to adjust to our big kind of news.
Right.
And so it was in one of these meetings that a parent approached me afterwards and said, you know what, I've really listened to what you've been talking about, and I think I know what you need.
Oh,
and I
like,
was
please
like,
tell me.
Thrilled. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have answers I want,
Yep.
She goes, I think you need a dog. And keep in mind, so it's a brand new diagnosis. My son's 2. I'm 4 months pregnant at the time with my with who would be my daughter.
Yeah.
And we were in the middle of some pretty dark and chaotic times with parenting, because we didn't have any control, and it was a bit of a dangerous situation. And I thought this woman was just off her rocker, and I need a dog like I need 10 heads. Like, this is the worst suggestion anybody's ever offered me.
Now she's making you think it's like a regular pet dog?
Yeah, she's like, well, she just kind of said you need a dog. And I was just like,
no, I don't.
She goes, no, like a service dog, like a working dog. And then I was confused, because I was like, well, like, he's not blind, because at the time I didn't know.
Right.
So I've done clearly a lot of learning, but at the time I have never heard of a dog to assist an individual with autism. And I wasn't familiar with any kind of service animal, to be totally honest. I was pretty ignorant, and I didn't realize that that there was anything other than kind of guide dogs to help with the vision impaired.
Sure.
And she said, no, there's dogs for autism, and some of your major concerns when it comes to safety and transitions and difficult places, she said, these are things that a dog can help with. And, I kind of looked at her sideways, and, I took it with a grain of salt, but it was the information that I needed to go home and scour the internet and see if she was making this up or if it was a thing. And it turns out it was a thing.
Yep.
It wasn't the program at the time was not a very well-known program, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners might be more aware now of all the different kinds of service dogs and what kind of roles they have to assist with persons with a varying amount of disability or exceptionalities. And but at the time, it wasn't really known. It was probably a very small pool of people, and the program was relatively young in Canada. So I did my research, and I looked through the list that the organization, who we ended up going through with, National Service Dogs in Cambridge, here in Ontario. And I read through a little list of, like, this is how an autism service dog can help your child. And the program, surprisingly, I learned, was for children. The program at the time was for children between the ages of 2 and 10 years old.
Wow.
And we fit into that.
Sure did.
There was no guarantee, of course, that just because you have a kid on the autism spectrum between those ages, that you would you'd be fortunate enough to be a good candidate for the program. But I read the safety that it could provide, and just how a dog could help support a family like mine, and it ticked all the boxes. Some of my biggest challenges, and we weren't functional at the time. We stayed at home. We didn't join family events. We weren't really participating in our community. We weren't living our lives the way that we had before, and certainly the way that we had, hoped and envisioned for ourselves once we decided to start a family.
Yeah.
It was dangerous. Mainly safety concerns. I had very little sense of control, very little control at all. And so we stayed at home, and it was depressing.
Sure.
And it wasn't enriching, and it certainly wasn't helping him.
No.
So I applied. And there was a very thorough interview and application process, and we learned a short time later that Atlas met the criteria for
Awesome.
the Autism Service Dog program.
Mm-hmm.
And it was news that is as exciting as some of the big news moments in your life,
Yeah.
like the proposal
Oh,
and
yeah.
because I knew what it would mean to our family. And at
Mm-hmm.
that point, we had exhausted so many other avenues, and I kind of felt like I was putting all my eggs in the Autism Service Dog basket. Like this was going to be the program that allowed our family to, connect with community and to leave the house and to get a sense of normalcy and a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And turns out I was absolutely right. It was the right fit for him and the right fit for the program. Um, Atlas received his first autism service dog, who retired about a year ago. So his first dog's name is Harris, and Harris was paired with Atlas when Atlas was 3 years old. So at the time, I've been told that Atlas was the youngest kid in Canada
Really?
to have ever received, an autism service
Oh,
dogs at
wow.
3 years old. And so we had our 40 something pound kid
Wow.
attached to this 70 something pound dog.
Yo, lab.
And when the dog came around, by the time we had waited for the dog for just shy of 2 years. I think it was about
Wow.
18-month wait. The wait times are much, much longer
Mm-hmm.
at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But my daughter had been born, and she was an infant at the time, and life was a bit chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
We attended a 7-day mandatory training session, handler training program workshop
Mm-hmm.
that National Service Dogs organizes for all families or individuals who will be receiving autism service dogs. It's in person.
Mm-hmm.
It was so worthwhile. I can't imagine being not having that kind of intensive
Yeah.
7-day program
Yeah.
to really guide me and to teach me everything that I needed to know,
Mm-hmm.
to walk out of there with some confidence. And I'm so grateful for the investment of time that the organization put in us. And then we were on our way. They continued to support us, and they came to our home, and they were there for some of
Oh.
the first outings.
Mm-hmm.
And so our first service dog started attending school with my son. It's not an automatic that kids who have autism service dogs, that the dogs will enter the school system.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, these days there's a lot of barriers
Yeah.
that the school boards have in place to make it
Yeah.
increasingly more challenging to get the dogs approved to accompany their kids
Mm-hmm.
in the public school system. We were extremely fortunate, and Harris started attending senior kindergarten with Atlas. So they were in kindergarten together, and
Wow.
Atlas doesn't know anything other than attending school and going everywhere in public. Anytime we're outside of the house,
Mm-hmm.
his dog is always by his side. And some of those initial tendencies that were debilitating for us to kind of exit the house are these transitions are so smooth now
Mm-hmm.
because of an autism service dog program, and just the consistency of just the dog is the constant. The dog, there might be different handlers in place because I'll send him off at the beginning of the day to school, and then there's a team that are trained to handle the dog at school. So even though environment can change, the adult supporting Atlas can change, the dog's always the constant. And so we always we have little routines, and we have little things that we do, and how we use the dog to when Atlas's behavior is escalating, or if he seems agitated,
Mm-hmm.
how we can redirect him using the dog as the tool. And the dog's the most useful and valuable tool that my family's ever experienced with our kid on the autism spectrum. And it's not necessarily the right fit for everyone. When he was working with Harris, his first dog, in our very early years, Atlas had a lot of elopement and escape behavior.
Okay.
And so he was like a little Houdini, and he could get out of anything. And man, he doesn't move fast these days as an almost 13-year-old.
Yeah.
But man, could that kid wiggle and squiggle and run and just sprint to wherever, the nearest thing that caught his eye was.
Yeah.
And so, but he was the kid who would run into a lake because he's drawn to water, without having swimming skills. And often, and very sadly, these are sometimes headlines that we read about a kid with autism being drawn to water, and it's a bit of a sad and dangerous story.
Wow.
That was certainly my kid. And he'd run in front of a car. He ran through parking lots. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
And me holding on to, grabbing his hood or his arm. My reflexes sometimes weren't fast enough. So we had a couple really scary instances. And I remember when Atlas and his dog first started attending school, and the dog at the time, he was tethered to his dog. So what that means is the dog has a working vest, and there's a whole bunch of things that are dangling off of the vest depending on the needs of the child. And one of the things is a tether rope. And you could shorten it so it was about a foot in length, and you could lengthen it so it was a few feet in length depending on your needs. And Atlas would wear a belt around his waist that he couldn't squiggle out of. And we would actually attach and tether him to his dog. And he wasn't much of a hand holder, and so there was a handle that also dangled off of the working vest of the dog. So he'd hold the handle, and he and he was tethered in case he let go and something piqued his interest, and squirrel.
Yeah.
And off he went. But one morning we were about to we lived within walking distance of the school that he attended at the time. We were just about 5 or 6 houses down from the school, but the sidewalk and the school was on the other side of the street. So we had to cross over. Because there was a school 5 or 6 houses down. You can imagine the traffic in the morning was pretty consistent.
Yep.
So I kind of made eyeballs I connected eyes with a car that was driving down the road, and we kind of agreed that like they were going to stop and we were going to go. And at did we hesitate? I can't, it's a little bit foggy for whatever reason. We went to the car went. Maybe it was that we were going to stop. I can't remember. Apologies. For whatever reason, we thought it was safe, and we were going to step forward, and the car started to go forward too. And there's a command that we are taught to give the dog that kind of anchors them in place, and the command is called halt. And when the dog hears that command, he basically just plants himself firmly down, and he won't move. And Atlas at the time wasn't a big kid. He was he was a small little kid in kindergarten. So the dog outweighed him by a bit and could stop him. And in that moment, I didn't get out the command. The command didn't come out of my mouth. And I had realized before, like just in the split second that these types of accidents happen, that the dog was already in a halt command and had prevented Atlas from running forward in front of this car.
Oh my God.
And so Atlas kind of went to go forward. He bounced back because he kind of hit the end of the tether.
The tether, yeah.
And it was as if there was like no travesty. There was no accident. There was no anything. And that happened probably 2 or 3 times within the first year, where there was these incidents where I told Atlas, we have to wait, good waiting. And for whatever reason, he didn't listen. When we got our first dog, it was before Atlas had a lot of his autism therapy. So I didn't really have the tools, and he didn't really have the tools, and he didn't really have a way to communicate or to be, or to understand direction or instruction. He didn't even respond to his name. But all of the eggs that I had put in that basket, it was the relief and, the sobs and the cries of just, of being so thankful that what could have been a terrible, terrible day ended up just being a hiccup, like a little blip that there was no effect to, what could have been. And I knew in that moment that, like, and it's difficult at the beginning if you have never handled a service dog before. There's so much to remember. I didn't have any confidence at the beginning. I was quite sleep deprived. I had,
imagine.
My 3-year-old at the time hadn't really started therapy yet. He had a little bit of therapy, but nowhere near what he has under his belt now. I had a baby, and I had so much to learn. And this, I really felt the weight of the responsibility. And the public in our community, there weren't many service dogs. And so going out into the public, it's like you're a billboard. You're this big shiny neon light, and dogs in public aren't very common, and they certainly weren't then. And so we attracted a lot of attention, and our attention that we got was fairly positive. Like, we got pretty good question. We've had some experiences that have been a bit sour, but for the most part, I felt this responsibility, to just to do the best job that I could with handling the dog, and to have control, and to remember everything I learned. And it takes a while, like the bond between the handler and the dog, it's not necessarily automatic. I'd never lived with a dog before. I didn't grow up with pets. I've never had a pet dog. So it was all new to me. I was all thumbs in the beginning, and add a layer of not sleeping well, and, stress and anxiety because of, my life at the time. It was a lot, but I really trusted in the program, and trusted in the dog's training, and trusted in my own training, and things became smooth. And then our life opened up, and our life became enriched, and we did things I never ever when I kind of projected into the future, around the time that Atlas got his autism diagnosis, and I understood that autism, you don't grow out of it, and it doesn't necessarily go away. And my future felt really bleak, and my future for him, because we couldn't do anything. I thought, my days of traveling are done. We're not going to be able to do all these things that, my other friends do with their kids. And but then when Harris entered the scene, we found ourselves on airplanes, and with the dog, and we found ourselves at fairs, and at theme parks, and going to the theater, and seeing live events, and doing things that were, honest to goodness, it seemed so impossible, but the impossible became possible because of this dog. And for me, it was just it was the extra set of hands that I didn't have, because my husband at the time was really busy with work, and was working some weekends, and worked quite late on evenings. And so I used to have to ask for help to take my kids to the park, because I couldn't handle it on my own. And then when the dog entered the scene, I was finally able to be independent as a parent, and the confidence that gave me as a parent to be able to, I got this. And I remember one of the scariest things I did, and I did it on my own. And to this day, I'm so proud of myself.
Oh, yeah?
That I took both of the kids on my own, because my husband was busy on this weekend, and I had an opportunity to take them to Great Wolf Lodge, which is a water theme park hotel. And my husband George, he said, just obviously you take the dog, and you ask for help when you need it, and I'm sure they'll be accommodating, and it'll be fine. And you got this. And, with a puffed out chest and a moment of confidence, I thought this was a great idea. And off I went. And I got there, and I remember thinking, what the heck was I thinking? I'm not gonna, this place is chaos.
Yeah, and a lot of kids.
Now I have this dog, and I have to watch the kids and the water. And I thought, what the heck did I just do? What am I doing here? And we did it. And the dog was amazing, and people were helpful and so respectful, and people are cool. Some people at times aren't.
Yeah.
But for the majority, our experience where, the dog too is also like, there's no indication when you look at my son that he has any kind of a disability.
Yeah.
That he's a special needs individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's typically developing. He doesn't have any features that would kind of indicate otherwise.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, and he's really big right now. He's the same height as me now.
Oh my God.
And he's a big boy. And people, at first sight, like, they don't know our story, and so sometimes his behaviors and his language, and he sings a lot, and he can be a bit of an awkward kid, and he doesn't understand. He's very delayed with his language, both expressive language and receptive language, so he doesn't understand, and he doesn't really know how to connect to people. People don't really know what to make of him, and sometimes people can get confused. But then they see this kid that's walking beside a service animal, and immediately people kind of put it together, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. But for us, it's just the dog tells the public to, you know what, just be patient with us. Just give us a couple extra moments. Bear with us. We're trying our best.
Yeah.
And even just as a visual kind of for the community, it allows us the space and the time that we sometimes need to get through our routines.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, unbelievable. I think back a little bit when I talked to Stephanie Ridley.
Yes.
She had just got there. It was right before all the lockdowns and everything with COVID. They had just got Beaumont, him, and he was just about to start school. And then everything shut down. But but she said the similar thing is that it took an example where they were at I think it was a soccer event, and Beaumont knew exactly what to do, because in the situation without the dog they would have had to have packed up and left.
Oh yeah.
But Beaumont,
we were famous for
packing up and leaving, right? Yep. And Beaumont came in.
The story of my life.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
and I
what
think
she
it's
said.
Common.
Yeah, and she said that when he went into what he does to diffuse and everything, she says it was amazing how the people were like, oh, so that's what he does.
That's what the dog's
That's what he does. And they were like, wow, that was amazing. And they saw.
Especially if it's that same community that has seen her have to pack up. And, your child's flailing and being loud and being disruptive, and, distracting. And, and also, like, I certainly can't speak for anyone else, but for myself, like, I felt a lot of guilt in some of those early years programs that I used to try my very best to participate with Atlas when we were young. And we were the family where it would escalate to the point that it was then appropriate because of our being so distracting to the rest of the group and the agenda of, that the activity or the tasks at hand. I felt so badly. So like I ended up leaving because I was myself frustrated, and then, I'm starting to escalate and I don't have control. So often it's easier to stay at home because I have more control in my house. I can lock the doors and lock the windows and try to make sure nobody escapes. And we're leaving a lot. Like, we've had to leave restaurants, we've had to leave family celebrations and birthday parties, like, because sometimes really heightened situations that, like, are not necessarily like negatively heightened, but like, think of like the hype and excitement that happens in a kid's birthday party or a play place, that can be really overstimulating. And one of the ways that we have used our dog is Atlas goes through a series of, we formed this routine really early days, and it was to encourage Atlas to feed his dog. We try as much as possible to get Atlas to be as independent as we can build him up to be, with responsibilities surrounding the dog. But for a dog, food is love, and we want to really build and focus on building the relationship between Atlas and his dog, which means a lot of the dog's never a pet. Harris is a pet now that he's completely retired, but our current dog, who we got about a year ago, so Atlas's successor dog, his name's Arnie, and Arnie's now Atlas's service dog. Oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought there.
Well, you know what? Let's actually go there, because let's you've gone through the whole thing. I mean, he changed your life, and you must have been at a crazy crossroad when it started to realize that, oh my goodness, Harris is getting older now. And they generally retire around, what, 10 years of age, I think? That's sort of around there?
Yeah,
9
and
10.
8 to 10 years old.
Yeah,
I think
8 to 10.
It also would depend on the dog and depend on the health and the energy level of the dog. And and our organization, National Service Dogs, they touch base with us, and they touch base with families and ask a lot of questions to make sure that you have a dog that's really slowing down and not getting able to keep up with, say, a very highly energetic kid. But yeah, the dog's working life is approximately around 8, 9, sometimes maybe 10 years. And we knew that sad reality that, dogs don't have the same life expectancy as humans. And
so in your situation, what do you do when you're coming up to that what happens when you're coming up to that place where, oh my, he's going to have to retire? What do you do?
We had so many questions. We had such a long list of considerations to make. It's not automatic that because your son or daughter had a service animal that they will continue receiving service animals. They still need to meet criteria. It still needs to fit. My goal was and still is to work Atlas out of having a service animal. I don't wish for him to lean on a service animal throughout his life. I have hopes that he will be able to be independent and navigate environments and transition smoothly in life between all, environments. And I had really hoped that in the 8 or 9 years that Harris was working with Atlas, that Atlas would work his way out of needing a dog, and that he would be able to be independent. And as it started to approach, I mean, Atlas had so many gains in those years, and he had years of therapy and a truly supportive community with lots of agencies and organizations that really strengthened us as a family and really to help him thrive and grow. But I kind of tested every 6 months or so in kind of the last few years when he was working with Harris. Like, I'd take him to an environment where there'd be like a non-preferred demand put on Atlas. And what I mean by that is something that he finds irritating. For example, like shoe shopping. So, you have to sit down on a bench and you need to like take off your shoes and you need to try on a bunch of shoes and you need to walk around and, do what every family does.
I'm with him on that one.
Yeah. I know.
Yep.
And so I'd take him into environments and I just kind of see how he'd do kind of without the dog and what would I do in those moments of escalation when I didn't have the dog to deal with. So I tested it out and they weren't particularly successful outings. And so I was kind of validated that, there's still so much value in him, because you kind of think, oh, he's good now, kind of like, you put glasses on someone who was seeing really blurry, and all of a sudden, they can see. But if you take those glasses away, well, they can't really see anymore, can they? But there's the impression that, oh, somebody's functioning really well with the tool. I'm sure they're going to be okay without the tool. But then in Atlas's case, we just felt like he was so better supported with the assistance of a service animal. And although a lot of those initial kind of safety concerns that kind of brought us to led us towards national service dogs, the bolting tendencies had really reduced. His language had increased over those, first 8-9 years. And some of those tendencies, they weren't prevalent anymore. And autism, in our experience in our family, is a bit of a roller coaster, because sometimes you have things that surface and then they go away, but then sometimes they come back. It's a bit of a guessing game, and you kind of have to be a bit nimble and a bit reactive. But it was really interesting to us that like all of the kind of like happy accident kind of ways that the dog supported him that initially wasn't really on my radar. One example is my kid has a difficult time connecting to others, and he can't have an open-ended conversation. He can answer routine-based questions, and he can state facts, and he can tell you what he had for lunch, and he can go through his list of food. But if you ask him an open-ended question, he doesn't know what to do with it, and it confuses him. One of the things that we found with his dog was that he learned things about his dog, and so he had this kind of a small amount of information that he could recite, and he could answer questions about his dog. And the dog ended up being almost this like stepping stone to like socializing with his peers, especially in a school environment, because kids like dogs, and it's not typical for a dog to be in a school, let alone in in your class. And you take this super awkward kid who doesn't know how to connect to others, who makes funny sounds and who sings and who he doesn't know how to connect to others. And then you take this dog and you put him beside the kid, and all of a sudden that dog, like that team, they're like a magnet for their peers, but a magnet in a positive way, like a really good way. So you take this kid who might have been ignored and not chosen to be on the team, and nobody wants to sit beside him for lunch or in an assembly because he can be loud and he can be distracting, and he's difficult to connect to. And Atlas became like the popular kid in the school, where people would give him high fives and people could connect to him because this dog, made them feel comfortable, and this dog reminded them of their own dogs, or there was just this familiar, happy, calmness that kind of surrounded the dog that the other kids fed off of as well. And I remember teachers and support staff sharing with me over the years, man, I gotta, fight the kids off. There's too many kids that want to have lunch with Atlas this week, and so they have to take turns. And it's just so heartwarming, because this dog's giving him an opportunity to connect to others in a way that if the dog wasn't in place, like what would school life look like for Atlas? What opportunities might he have? But he has all these kids who want to surround him, and if that's because of the dog, then wonderful. The fact that it's enriching Atlas and providing opportunities, and one of the things is because he can answer questions about his dog, the teacher or EA will encourage his peers, why don't you ask Atlas some questions about his dog?
Right.
And then Atlas can answer and have like a conversation.
Yeah.
So there's all these little things that, wasn't at all on my radar, any real concern to me about that part of how a service dog can help, but connecting him to others, and to give him that like experience in life that otherwise he's the kid who would be ignored. He's the kid, sadly, that wouldn't have the same opportunities to have a sense of belonging. And I don't know how that I can only imagine. I'm sure there's a lot of families listening right now,
Sure.
who are navigating some mental health with their children with autism. Atlas doesn't necessarily have an awareness that is obvious to us when it comes to sadness or any kind of mental challenge of not feeling a sense of belonging within his groups at school and outside of school. But to give the kid an opportunity to feel very welcome in all environments is one of the best gifts that a service animal could ever offer.
So you
kid like
realized
Atlas.
that you needed to continue on with the service dog in your life.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And now you're at that place where Harris has to retire. So then,
yeah.
what do you do?
It was interesting the way that it worked for our family because of the pandemic. So our kids, everybody was doing school from home. And we, as a family, we chose to do remote school for 2 full years. And so my kids, I wasn't even going into public. And so certainly if I could avoid my kids going into public, and stay away from grocery stores and stuff like that, then I wasn't going to bring them. And so we found that we weren't going out really anyway. And so the dog wasn't accompanying Atlas anywhere outside of our house. And so it was kind of this natural
I see what you mean.
transition.
Harris was just sort of naturally transitioning
Yeah, we were
into
just all at
retirement.
home. And so, it was almost like he was forced into a bit of an early retirement because we weren't leaving the house, and so he wasn't being used. He wasn't invested. He wasn't working outside of the home because nobody was leaving the home.
Right.
And so, National Service Dogs, the conversations continued, and we got to the point where it was like, okay, well, we have to start talking about Harris's retirement.
Yeah.
But it had been, I think, if the pandemic hadn't happened, it might have been a little bit more shocking for the dog to all of a sudden. I'm sure that they would have weaned him.
Yeah.
But for him to stop working so abruptly, but because of the pandemic, he had already not been really invested for about a year. And so when we kind of said, okay, he's going to be retiring, it was such a natural thing for him. And then we applied again to have a second service dog. And very, very thankfully, we decided that Atlas, there'd be a lot of value and enrichment to his life if we offered him another service dog. And everybody agreed. And the doctor's notes and the schools, and you can imagine the paperwork and the people involved in a big decision like that.
Sure.
And so we got Arnie, and Arnie is a bigger dog. He is he's a black dog, and he has longer, kind of softer hair, which it's all been new to us because we've been used to Harris. Harris is a golden lab retriever mix, and he's 70 something pounds, and Arnie has about 10 pounds on him, and he's a bit of a bigger, he's taller, he's a bit of a bigger dog, and he has different feeling kind of fur or hair.
Yeah.
And I remember the conversations between me and National Service Dogs, and they said, okay, Kat, in a perfect world, if you were to describe Atlas's next service dog, like just the perfect dog, how would you describe the dog? What traits and features would you be looking for? And I said, okay, you're going to laugh. I said, okay. And I said, so I am looking for Atlas's next dog to really match his personality and to match him in energy and gait. And they said, okay. And I said, so I'm looking for a very large, very slow moving, very lazy, and independent service dog.
Oh my God.
Not very needy for attention, but a very independent dog. And, of course, we all had a chuckle. And they said, "Can I ask why?" And I said, "Well, I have a very large, very slow moving, independent kid."
Yeah.
And so I said I would feel terrible, and I don't know that it would be a good fit to have like a really high energy um, dog who maybe has a very fast gait and likes to move
Yeah.
and is very like affectionate and like really needy for attention. And at this point, I I knew exactly um, what Atlas's needs were and how a dog, I had about, almost 10 years of handling experience at this point. So I kind of thought, wow, I really know what I want. And they said, well, it's interesting you say that because some of our larger dogs are a little bit lazier. And I said, well, that would be great. And so they said, okay, well, we'll keep an eye out. And then Atlas was paired with Arnie, and Arnie and Atlas are soulmates. And they 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 are so similar, and they just fit. And I don't have to feel bad at all when Atlas doesn't shower Arnie with all sorts of attention. He can be really picky and choosy when he wants to give his dog attention. But I have a dog who doesn't seem, disappointed or upset by his own needs being met. It's a really good fit, and I think they're both. It's a very healthy fit, and I have a slow moving dog. I have a boom, boom, boom kind of dog that just kind of like, almost like he wanders instead of walks. And it's perfect because Atlas is very slow moving when we go on walks. And I'd feel terrible to constantly have to kind of reel the dog in to heel nicely to Atlas, but they really they live life at the same pace. So it's a wonderful fit. So it's interesting because we never owned Harris.
Right.
When Harris was living with our family, we were responsible for, taking care of him and his vet bills and his food, and we acted and treated him like he was a member of our family, and we were responsible for him. But he still was owned and belonged to National Service Dogs all of those years that he was working. And so upon his retirement,
what
we
happens?
we were asked if we wanted to adopt him.
Yeah.
Now, in some families, it might be complicated, but we knew that it would be the right move to keep Harris. So we did adopt him, and he is living his best life as a pet for the first time in his life.
Oh my God.
And so he no longer wears the vest. The vest has been retired. He does not have public access anymore, and he is a pet, and everybody can pet him and give him love. And they retire the dogs when they're still at a peak. Like, they still are healthy and energetic, and just to offer them a really nice, long, and well-deserved retirement.
So I'm sure people are dying to know, like, how does Harris, how does he, coping with retirement? How does he get along with Arnie? And what's the story? I mean, like, I'm sure they're dying to know.
There's such good questions. I was a bit nervous when we brought Arnie home, and we had this whole plan. We were told this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to introduce them, because it's all about keeping control. Anyway, so the dogs were obviously excited, but we had to maintain control. And I walked one dog on one side of the street, and George walked the other dog on the other side of the street. And then eventually they came together, and they were actually for the first, I'd say, over a month. Both dogs were on leashes 24 hours a day in the house.
Oh, okay.
So you're kind of setting the stage and letting them know what the expected behavior is going to be. And so it was all about control, control, control. And then over time, if they seem to be behaving themselves, you give them a little bit more of a lead. And then maybe they're just dragging their leashes behind them for a few weeks until eventually they could be off leash in the house, and you have a lot of control, and they understand the expectations.
Okay.
So that was interesting, which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
I find that Harris is very happy because in the first time in his life that he's lived with us, he has a buddy, like he has a companion, because we didn't have any other animal before. It was just him. So I feel that when Arnie entered our family, Harris got this, like, I don't know, this new energy, this youthful energy that kind of bubbled up out of him. And to see him just stimulated in a way that we couldn't offer him without having a second animal has been really exciting. And I honestly believe that it's going to be the reason that I think that he'll live longer, because he, you know, his needs are met and he has a companion and they're buddies, and he has somebody to help keep him young and you know, encourage him to run around and stay fit in the backyard. One of the things with Harris is Harris loved working.
Yeah.
Harris, as soon as you held up the leash and the vest, he couldn't keep his body from moving. Like, he was, that tail was wagging. He was like, it was like, you know, telling me you were going to take me on a European vacation. Like, just all of the excitement that he got, how fulfilled he was from being a working dog. And so one of the kind of bittersweet moments that we have quite regularly is when we're suiting up Arnie, because, you know, Arnie goes to school now and not Harris. And Harris hangs out with me at home. And when I'm putting the vest on Arnie in the morning, and you can just see Harris, like, maybe today's the day, just hoping that I'll put it on him one last time. Because he loved to work. He loved to please. He loved to serve. And he set the bar so high. Arnie's doing terrific at, you know,
he's lovely.
At learning the ropes and fitting into our family, because it's new. We've only had him for about a year. We actually have his public access test coming up next month.
Oh, wow.
So it's an annual test that dog handler teams need to go through and pass successfully. That allows us to maintain having public access with our animals. And, you know, they're basically looking for control, and they kind of throw in some distractions, and it's important that the dog is in control and not reacting in any way that would be you know, infringing on the public or drawing attention to themselves. So we have that coming up with Arnie. But
do you have to go over to NSD for that?
No, they actually come to us, and we do it in our own community.
Wow.
And so typically I've done a lot of public access tests with Harris over the years. And he was always a star. And I used to get so worked up and so nervous because, you know, there's a lot hinging on this test, because if there's areas of concern, I don't own the dogs. If they see that I'm not a suitable handler, that I don't have the control, that I haven't kept, you know, the training, that I'm not, you know, that I'm kind of cutting corners and not fulfilling my obligation to the program, they could revoke the dog. They could say, you know what, we got to work on some things, and, you know, you're in probation, or
no,
not that happens often,
no,
but
still.
I think, you know, you finally got this thing you'd been dreaming about that would make your family functional. And the idea that if I'm not doing my due diligence, and if I'm not being responsible, you know, the dog might not be in place anymore. My gosh, so I used to get really scared, which was silly.
But I bet you don't now. I bet you're not too worried about your test coming up. Your confidence is
any tests. I have to admit, I do get a little bit nervous. But I think, like, when I'm in the moment, the reality is we use our dogs a lot. It depends on the family. Our dog is in vest. When we're out in public, I would say the dog's with us 95% of the time. There's a few instances where we don't bring the dog because it's not appropriate. For example, the dog does not accompany my son to summer camp. The dog does not snowboard. The dog doesn't go snowboarding. I think Arnie would love it, though. He's really a winter dog. But,
that's right.
But there's some instances And there's certain people in the community who might support Atlas from time to time that aren't trained to handle the dog. And so National Service Dogs would provide training to anybody in our team who is going to be spending significant time supporting our son. It's a very small group at the moment. It's myself and my husband and a small school team. But
that's amazing because yeah. So do you ever because I know that they get to go, you used to take Harris out on like a regular walk, not a working walk, just for a walk, right? So you take, do you ever take like Harris and Arnie out for just a walk, like dog walks?
Yeah, we certainly do.
Oh, okay.
We like on weekends and stuff, we have we're so fortunate, we have some wonderful trails just
trails
within
around
walking
here,
distance from where we live. And we'll take the dogs wouldn't be in Vest, and so we give them opportunities. Like one of the types of walks we can take is like a sniffing walk or a sniffy walk. And you kind of stop every so often and you kind of like give them the length of their lead and you allow them an opportunity to sniff around for a minute or so, and then you continue, and then the expectation is they walk nicely, and then you might stop again to give them an opportunity to smell around. And so those types of just family weekend walks are done, without a vest on.
Nice.
The dog is kind of always working though, which was really interesting for us to learn at the very beginning of our journey, that the rules, there's a lot of rules in place, and it's certainly up to families to, work within the rules, what's going to work for their family. So one of the things that we learned really early on when we did our training with National Service Dogs was we learned that these working dogs are not pets. Even when their vests are off, they are kind of always working, and you can't engage with them the way that you would with a family pet. My daughter, who was an infant when we brought Harris home for the first time, didn't know any different because she was so young. But we never introduced the dog to her in any kind of capacity that it was for her to interact with, for her to talk to and pet, and for her to spend time with. She's known her whole life that this is Atlas's dog. This is a working animal, and she knew like hands off that this dog isn't pet. And so for some families who had like older kids that they were kind of bringing the dogs into, I think it could be a little bit more challenging. I had assumed that when the vest is off, it's a family pet, and when the vest is on, it's a working animal. And I learned that that's not the case.
Yeah, they can't switch it off like that.
No, like in order for the program to be really successful, you really want to grow the bond between the kid and the dog. And so almost all opportunities for growing that bond, you just really, really want to encourage. And it means that even for me, like even if I want to sit down and snuggle with the dog, I mean, I have to have a certain bond with the dog, and I certainly did that, but not to the point where I got the dog too worked up and too silly. I really wanted to encourage the dog to always go to Atlas. So even when the vest is off, there's certain rules and there's certain ways that we behave around the dog. So when we're doing like a family walk and the vests are off, often we encourage Atlas to hold the leash and actually watch, to walk his dog himself. And we're of course right there if, maybe another dog is approaching and he doesn't necessarily have the control that I do on handling the dog. So I'll take, the leash back so that until we pass, and then when it's safe again. The other thing too is the dog actually in those instances encourages Atlas to walk a little bit faster, which in some instances is really great. So Atlas gets a little bit more exercise. But most of the time when we're out of the house, the dog would be in vest.
So did you find, like, I know that Harris is still having, he was transitioning there, but he seems to be, happy as a pet now.
Yes.
So has he been able to make that transition to know that, or I mean, I know he stands there wishing he could get, put in vest and go, but generally speaking,
he has such a wonderful life. And I think he had a wonderful life all of those years that he was the working service dog in the house. And I think he has a wonderful life too. I mean, like, the bond that Atlas has with Harris is so strong. In fact, like us trying to encourage the bond between Arnie, I wouldn't say it's been tricky because I think it's been going really great, but it's interesting now how like the bond that he had with his dog, where it's not really obvious. It's not Atlas's relationship with his dogs is not what the typical boy dog relationship looks like, where like the kid's hanging all over the dog and really like talking to the dog and reading to the dog. It's not what it looks like. The dog is really used as a tool, as far as Atlas is concerned. But actually at the beginning of COVID, Atlas has never shown a lot of affection towards his dog at home when the dog's not in vest.
Yeah.
And we're just hanging out. Like he's never really like snuggled with him, pet him, talked to him. And then the pandemic happened. And then I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For the first time, he is like calling for his dog, following his dog around the house, like behaviors in like almost their entire working life together I had never seen. And all of a sudden, this softer, gentle, snuggly relationship between them, where Atlas was wanting to be with his dog, and even during remote school, wanting to snuggle with his dog on the bed and wanting to pet him and talk to him and be all over him. And it was really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
And that didn't just stop. So Atlas still certainly gives, actually we have to really encourage him to also play with Arnie.
Right.
But he's very connected to Harrison. Often if you ask him what his dog's name is, and he's not standing right beside Arnie, he will often say, my dog is Harris. Because it's been drilled into him and ingrained in most of his experience with the dog. But Harris has such a wonderful life. And I think family and friends and community members for all of these years tried so hard to follow all of these rules that we had set in place, where you can't pet the dog and you can't talk to the dog, you can't cuddle with him, you can't throw a ball for him. All of a sudden everybody gets this experience where they can look, it only took 10 years, but now I can finally give you a scratch and give you a cuddle, and I just want to hug you. And so Harris is getting so much love, and I'm home with him during the day, and although he can't go into public spaces anymore, I think that he's living out some wonderful years as a furry couch potato.
He's just I mean, both of them are just amazing. And I've said this to you before, when you just look at these dogs, they are so special. And that's how they make it into the program. Because as people, they don't all make it. People don't realize not every single puppy that's born into the National Service Dogs. It's a small percentage that make it, into service. And you look in their eyes, and they're just, oh my God, they look in your soul, and they connect with you. They're amazing.
It's amazing. I never in a million years would have thought that, like the journey that your life takes you on. And I certainly never thought that I'd have a dog. And I certainly never thought that I'd have a service animal. And, but I can tell you, these dogs gave our family our life back. And I can't even, I wouldn't even know. I couldn't even say what our lives would look like had we not received these service dogs. And, but I know in my heart that there's no way it would be as enriched with experience and opportunity in the way that it has been, because of the opportunities that the dogs opened up for us. And even the way that our families kind of perceived by the public. I mean, we can still go through really rocky and turbulent, situations while we're out in stores or in libraries or wherever we are, because, Atlas is having a difficult moment, and he's big and strong and loud. And when his adrenaline's going now, it can draw a lot of negative attention.
Sure.
And, but having the dog with us, it also calms me in those moments. And it's just having him in our presence tells our community a little piece of our story without having to say it, and they know, okay, like this woman needs to,
give her
get
some
control of the
space,
situation, and she's trying her best,
take
and
a
we need to give
breath.
space. But I mean, I remember hearing whispers and judgments standing in lines at grocery stores because my kid was having a difficult moment and I didn't have control over the situation, and I felt horrible. And I don't very thankfully I don't feel like that anymore. And it's we navigate so well, but it's because we have, these dogs. We have this dog with us that, man, their jobs are so important, and they do it so well. And at any time that I've ever had, kind of like the nerves that I have leading up to a public access test, and I hesitate, and I'm like, oh, are we going to be able to do this? If my confidence is waning, it's like every time the dog has never let us down. The dog has, you just have to remind yourself, like,
trust the dog.
You know what? We got this because we have the dog. It's been absolutely life-changing. We're beyond grateful for the opportunity, and it didn't just, the extent at which we are supported. It's not just supporting the child. It's supporting, the family. It's it's supporting the community. It's supporting, everybody wins. Everybody wins.
Wow. I think that's a great place to leave it, because everybody does win. I just, I'm so glad that you shared this whole story with us, because as I've said, I've had Danielle Forbes on, who's the co-founder and executive director of National Service Dogs, a couple of times, and it's amazing hearing the story. But when you hear it from someone and what these dogs have given to you, and now you have the joy of having 2 dogs in your home shedding and bringing in muddy footprints everywhere.
I know, and you know what? It's like, it's so worth it. It's so funny because if you would have known, the cat before kids and before dogs, and you see the cat today, you'd be like, there's no way you're the same person. Just like what I allow, just silly things. Like I'm like, there's never going to be a dog on the bed. Dogs aren't on the bed. And every single night there's 4 adults, or four humans rather.
2 dogs.
And 2 dogs all up on the bed. And we read stories every night before bed. And I giggle, and I'm like, who are you?
Who are these
like, you have 2 dogs, and like 2 huge dogs, and there's hair up my nose when I'm sleeping. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way.
I know. Oh my God. That's amazing. Oh my God. Well, I can't thank you enough for doing this interview with me, because I think it was just it's so amazing to hear your story in particular. And you know how much I love you guys and Harris. And it was so wonderful meeting Arnie and seeing him in action. And so I know your time is very precious for you, so really thank you for doing this. And
no, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for helping share our story.
Anytime.
And kind of opening up our world a little bit to people who are curious and want to learn. And maybe there's a listener who is, me 12, 13 years ago and isn't sure if something like that's the right avenue. And I would just say, like, explore it, ask a million questions. If there's a wait list to be on, sit on the wait list, and you never know if it's the right fit and the opportunity for you. But sometimes it can feel very bleak when you're kind of in the trenches, so to speak, with especially with children with autism, and especially if it's the earlier years, or if therapy hasn't, the opportunity for therapy hasn't been there. There's so many amazing programs out there. The Service Dog program was a really good fit for my family. And if you have similar challenges, especially being out in the community, and it's unsafe, or you find a bit sheltered because of your situation, maybe start to investigate and ask questions. And
could be the key.
It's an incredible program. Yeah,
absolutely. All right, Kat, I'm going to leave it at that because, again, I thank you so much. Hugs for everybody all around. And
thank you.
I'm going to be talking to you soon, okay?
Okay, thanks, Val. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, if you ever wondered about the role of service dogs and how they change lives, you just have to hear Kat's story. I've seen Harris and Arnie in action, and it really is something. And if you want to hear the story of National Service Dogs, just access the 2 interviews I have done with Danielle Forbes, co-founder and executive director of National Service Dogs. Plus, the interview with Stephanie Ridley is quite an eye-opener as well, because she had just got their service dog, Beaumont, when I interviewed her. So my thanks again to Kat Anderson for sharing her and her son's story. And the best part is, now that Harris is retired, I can pet and cuddle him all I want when he comes to visit. Thanks for listening, everyone. And as always, thanks for caring. Thank you for listening to Val Talks Pets. Please remember to follow or subscribe to ensure that you never miss an episode. To really help the show and to make it easier for others to find, please rate and review each episode that you find interesting and helpful. And don't forget that you can also email me at val@valtalkspets.com with topics you would like me to address or with any questions you may have. Also, check out my website at valtalkspets.com and let me know what you think and how we can improve upon it. Thanks for caring.